What was your process with the emergency poet in the ambulance? Like you would just like pull up and jump out and start reading poetry to people, or like
Well,
did you
no,
get
no.
calls? Like
I was in the first one I did was a poetry festival. So people, and quite often it was art or music festival. So people are at a festival, they're very receptive to kind of odd things at a festival. And people would come up and say, what's going on here? I had my poetry pharmacy of my little pills with poems inside the pills under an awning. So people would come up and I would, it's quite explicitly poetry on prescription. They'd go into the back of the ambulance, lie down on a stretcher. I'm dressed as a doctor with a stethoscope and a clipboard. And then in a kind of pastiche of a therapy session, ask them very unexpected questions about how they relax, their reading habits, questions that are really lovely to answer. So they're kind of intimate but not invasive. And then at the end of it, prescribe them a poem that, not my poetry, but poetry that was already printed out as a prescription. So I had hundreds of poems to call on.
In the pills, like on a scroll. No,
the pills were giveaways under the awning for people who didn't have time for. So the pharmacy, you go and self-prescribe, and then the poems that I gave them would be one or two complete poems.
So the pill has a little rolled up poem, and like you open the capsule of the pill and there's a little rolled up poem inside.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Why didn't I ever think of that?
I don't know.
And I'm talking to you from Shropshire on the English-Welsh borders, where we have a Victorian shop with its original fittings. And I thought it looked like a pharmacy, so set up the poetry pharmacy here.
Is that the Bishop's Castle location?
Yeah, it's in Bishop's Castle. Yeah.
I did my research.
and then it's had lots, right from the beginning, it's had quite a lot of occasional media attention one way or another. The ambulance was very, a big piece of theatre. And now we have a poetry pharmacy inside Lush on Oxford Street. And we're about to open probably a third poetry pharmacy here in the UK as well.
Oh, wow. Nice. Where would the third one be?
Almost certainly in Bath, Jane Austen Land.
Okay.
Man, we should bring this concept to America in a real way.
I know.
What was your process with the dementia patients? What type of poetry would you read with them to jog the memory, as it were?
It was a really interesting project, actually, because and this is what led to doing Emergency Poet very directly. It was not. Sometimes it was to share a poem and sometimes to share a poem in a group. So you might read some poems on kite flying, and what you've done is take a group of people outside in their minds to fly a kite or take them to the sea or whatever, which was a wonderful thing to do. But what I did a lot of the time was make poems, found poems from their words. So sit alongside them and ask questions that are not memory based or memory specific. Talk to me about flowers, or talk to me about the sea, or if we were going to go on a picnic, where would you go? So those kind of idealized states, and then we'd make a poem from their words, and then I would read it back to them so that they were happy with it. So it was poetry, creatively, I suppose, rather than necessarily sharing a poem.
Like a workshop almost. That's really cool.
Mostly.
So you get their brain working in that, you get them thinking about specific things in certain ways, and then you turn it into a work of art to show them from their own thoughts. Yeah. That's brilliant.
It's a big question, that one, because the world of poetry does so many things, whether it's people coming into, we have workshops here and poetry readings, regular open mics, and then you literally have that poetry community, you know, people, a place and space for people to come together, to be heard, to listen to other people, and that kind of exchange of an intimate exchange, again in a safe place. Because I'm absorbed in it, you know, I'm surrounded by the selling of physical books, and that both poetry pharmacies are explicitly set up to move away from that digital space. You know, they're about real conversations, real coffee, paper, pen, books, you know, and they have, even the music in the background is kind of nostalgic, so that it feels otherworldly, but also the internet is a great space for having brought it back as well. You know, I don't know how aware of Book Talk you are on TikTok, for example, and I think it's been responsible for a huge resurgence of people enjoying the physical object of a book, and of course we've had a tiny, you know, a couple of years ago, it was very tiny business with 2.5 members of staff, including me. And in the last year, we've had a huge growth. I think we have 23 members of staff now, and it's getting bigger. And so it feels to me like there's a big resurgence of interest in the kind of simplicity and intimacy of one person speaking to another in poetry.
Poetry it's an outlet for sure. I mean, all artistry is, and I think that's something we talk a lot about, particularly in the vein of mental health on the show, and mental health care treatments and kind of the alternative ways to approach curing our minds, right? And our hearts, I think, and kind of from the inside out, right? No pharmaceuticals actually required sometimes.
Yeah. No, it's lovely to, you know, I mean, we recommend we put our little poetry pill bottles in the bathroom cabinet, you know, so if you're feeling stressed, you go open the cabinet and instead you get a little poem, and take that down, and, you know, slow your breathing a little and calm down instead.
Yeah, treat it physically like medicine, and you know, mentally it will work more like medicine.
Yeah.
You know, we trick ourselves into stuff like that all the time in this life. The whole placebo effect is a very real thing.
It's very real. Yeah. And why, you know, sometimes we just need to open a cupboard, take something, you know, that we need to feel that we're doing something to address it. So, you know, why not put art in the way instead?
Absolutely.
This has been a Shut Up production.
Shut up!